brief period of welcome here. I am Carrick Martin. I am Congressman Loudermilk's district director, so I am here in the district about every day. And I have a staff that we'll try to introduce here. First off, we have Bart Mitchum. He's one of our field representatives. We have, if I can get the staff to come in, we have Matt Parnell. Stephen Hall is there with the camera. We have Phyllis Nall, who works some here at the Cartersville Courthouse. We have an office right downstairs. Easton Randall is our Deputy Chief of Staff. He is here from Washington. Crystal Gilbert is our Constituent Services Director. She provides an interface for us to 94 federal agencies. So if you have a problem with Social Security or VA, she will be your primary point of contact till she gets somebody else trained to help her. We have John Wallace, who's one of our field reps. Shauna Mercer is our Communications Director. We have a couple other people who are out on the road tonight. Claire Bartlett is a field representative, but she is in Cobb County at a meeting. And Mac Parnell is right out there. This is the second time I've introduced him, and he is one of our field reps, and he's getting ready to leave to go to a meeting too. Our Chief of Staff is Rob Ackerson, and he alternates between the district and Washington. And we feel like we have a good team. Most everybody has connections to the district or has moved there. We have two legislative aides up in Washington, Constituent Services Director, which would be Susanna, and Ellen James is our scheduler up there. So we have a staff up there and a staff here. So we'll have an office here in Cartersville, as I mentioned before. It's on the first level down here. Our main office will be in Woodstock, and the renovations on that are finally about done. And eventually we will have an office in the Galleria area of Cobb County, trying to hit all the geographic sections of our district. So anyway, we do appreciate y'all being here today. And the first thing we want to do is open in prayer. And Anders Best is going to do that for us.
Lord, we thank you for this time. We praise you for this good turnout, and we thank you for these folks that came out to have a conversation about the condition and the future of our country, and pray that you would just bless our time together. Pray that it would be productive and resourceful and useful, and that it would be part of the exercise as we become better people and sending better leaders to Washington and having better results for our nation. Pray that you bless our time together, bless Barry and his staff, and pray that you would just continue to guide him and direct him and order his steps, so that we'll have results that will give you all the honor and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. If I can get everybody to stand, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll turn it over to Rob Ackerson now.
As Carrick said, I have the honor of serving as Congressman Loudermilk's Chief of Staff. Echo Carrick and talking about the team that we have that's hopefully going to be a great interface for you, and will always be available. We want the folks of the 11th District to be proud of their representation, but most of all to feel like it's a resource for you as an interface with the government, and be proud of the representation that you have in the proceedings that go on in Washington and back here in the district. We have learned a lot of things that go on in the congressional office that folks don't know day to day. There's a lot of things in the congressional office, people that work in there that do things that the vast majority of the public is not even aware that they're doing, and that's services for people on a day-to-day basis, things that they may not be able to get help with anywhere else. So, but without spending too much more time, let me just say that this is an honor. This is the first of what will be many town halls as we seek to stay in touch with the folks and communicate, have a conversation about how to lead the country, how to lead and represent the district. So I'm very proud to see a crowd this size, and because that's I think one of the biggest things wrong with the country today is that the general public has receded and is not participating like this in their governance. So I'm glad you're all here. I appreciate the fact that you're here. Without further ado, I'll introduce Congressman Barry Loudermilk.
Thank you so much for coming out, especially in this cold weather. When my wife and I left D.C. back last Friday, I said, I can't wait to get home back to where it's a little warmer. It was colder this morning here than it was in Washington. I had a reporter from Roll call me, and I said, hey, before we do this interview, tell me what the temperature is. He said, oh, it's 11 degrees, and we looked at it was 10 degrees here. So, but before we get started, I appreciate Jeff Lewis. Jeff and I served in the Georgia legislature together, and now he's on our DOT board. And, Jeff, do you want to take a couple minutes and just, I know transportation is a big issue right now, and maybe if you got anything you want to update or say.
I'll just take a second or two for those of you who may not be aware of what a DOT board member is and does. The 11th district that I represent is the exact same 11th congressional district that he represents. It's just I do it in the dial it down to the capacity of transportation for the state of Georgia. And unlike Barry and state legislators that are elected by roughly 20-some-odd thousand registered voters if you're in a House district, we on the State Transportation Board, we have probably one of the most difficult constituencies in the world. We are elected, in my case, by 32 legislators. And that's a combination of state House members and senators and catering to their needs, which of course gets us down to answering to the needs of the general public. Out of 26 departments in the state of Georgia, only one is elected, has elected members, and that's your DOT. And those members are elected by the General Assembly. Every other department in the state of Georgia, their appointments are made by the governor. And of course, we are tasked to make sure we deliver transportation infrastructure up to an expectation that you would have. I'm glad to say on the one hand that we have one of the best road systems in the country. With the limited resources that are available, we do keep roads in pretty good condition. We do have issues with congestion in certain areas that we're trying to deal with, but most national grades give us a couple of thumbs up on that. Having said that, we still have a long way to go, and we have a lot of challenges out there. And I know the one you may be hearing the most of lately is funding challenges. The General Assembly is taking up a bill right now to attempt to address that. It's gone through a number of changes. It will likely go through a number of more. But I want to point out that we as board members and the department, we're not advocating for what they do to bring us more revenue. All we was asked to do was to show them what the needs are if you want the expectation levels to be maintained that we have to deliver. Because in short, what we are facing is a higher cost to deliver what you expect of us, and flattening revenues are going down. So that's our challenge. We showed that challenge to the General Assembly, and we're leaving it to them to see what they can come up with. We will work with whatever they do, whether it's nothing or everything that the bill had originally, but we will figure out to make it work. I want you to know that our DOT website, you can look on that, and you can find out contact information on me that way. If you have a concern that I might need to know about, please bring it to me. We're changing the culture of that department. We want to be a department of yes, or try to be a department of yes instead of a department of no right off the bat, but realizing sometimes that must be the answer. I've noticed that change there, and I hope people that may have to do business with the DOT has noticed that change, but we're here to make sure your transportation infrastructure is up to your expectation, because that is one of the 4 critical ingredients in economic development for this state. I know, Congressman, they're working on a number of issues in Washington that's transportation related. It doesn't make the headlines because it doesn't involve international affairs or federal budget, but it's very important to us as states, because the unfortunate position that Georgia is in is today, right now, we rely too much on the federal government for our funding. And we are attempting to find solutions to wean us off of that reliance. So so that we can do more stuff and bring it without those compliance issues. Having said that, thank you, Congressman, for this time, and I'm available as a resource for you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Like I said, Jeff and I served in the legislature. He was my mentor the first year I was there. He was supposed to keep me out of trouble, but yeah. Let me just kind of give you a little update on where we are in Congress. As we're, as a new congressman, first one from Bartow County since 1881. So, we're getting our feet wet, getting in there. And as we were going to Washington, told my staff and my family, I said, when we first get there, I'm just going to ease in. I'm going to get the lay of the land. We're going to lay low a little bit. And they said, yeah, right. We've never known you to do that. And I said, no, seriously, because, this is so serious. We live in the most dangerous time, I believe, in the history of our nation. Not only from outside threats, but even those inside our own nation. A different ideology than what our founding fathers had. And so there's a lot of different challenges, but the first week there I was assigned to the Homeland Security Committee, which obviously with what we're dealing with was a big step. And then also in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And I think it was the second week we were there, we got a call. Easton, who works in our legislative department, he handles all of our legislative affairs there. He called me, he said, you coming into the office? I said, yeah. He said, we got to talk. I was like, great. He said, the Science Space Committee came by, the Technology Committee came by and said, you've got a hearing on some fraud, waste, and abuse by the National Science Foundation. I said, okay. And he said, and you're chairing the hearing. I was like, okay, it's the second week I'm here and I'm chairing a hearing. So we got thrown right into it, but that's what we're there for. I told our staff, look, we got 2 years. That's all that we can guarantee is 2 years, and we're going to go up there. We're going to do everything that we can. And so, just to give you an idea of just some of the things that Congress has accomplished, but also the idea of just wading into it. Since I've been there, I've chaired a couple of hearings. I presided over the House, and I think I've probably made as many floor speeches as some of the senior guys there. But it's important that the voice of the 11th District be heard in Washington, D.C. We hit the ground running. In the first week, we identified that we had a major problem here in the U.S. Wisely so, the previous Congress had only funded the Department of Homeland Security through the end of February. And the reason being, as you know, that the President, which in my opinion and many others, stepped outside the constitutional bounds and decided that he would grant limited amnesty to about 5 million people who were illegally in the country here. Since that time, we've reached out to some groups. Center for Immigration Studies came into my office a couple of weeks ago. We sat down and met, and they told me that they, just fresh off the press, they had received a Freedom of Information Act release from the Department of Labor. And to their surprise, my surprise, and many in Congress, since 2009, the President has already given out almost 5.5 million work permits to foreigners. Now, this was during the time that we saw the greatest decline in American jobs in many years. The analysis is being done now, and in fact, I saw the President today made a comment about how we haven't seen a rise in the mean wage, the medium wage out there. Well, the analysts are looking at it because we flooded the job market with inexpensive foreign labor that have been taking American jobs. So we need to fund the Department of Homeland Security. It has a very critical function. Being on Homeland Security, I can tell you that ISIS is the greatest threat this nation will see since World War II. It is the greatest threat. Al-Qaeda, who planned the 9/11 attacks, pales in comparison to ISIS. They are the best funded, the most armed, and the most radical and most ruthless of any terrorist organization. In fact, in a hearing we had recently, the Department of Homeland Security, we had the FBI, we had some folks from the intelligence services there. They said not only is ISIS recruiting, they are effectively using the internet, far beyond any other terrorist organization, not only to communicate, but to recruit. They're going as far as targeting Western youth, using popular video games and promising that they can live out the fantasy world that they have in their video games. As a result of their use of the internet, and if you've seen any of the videos, they're very professionally produced, and I mean, they are studio quality video productions. And so in that hearing, they told us that there is the largest surge of foreign fighters going into Syria to join in the jihad that we've known in history. So we're looking at a very dangerous situation. Now, some of the administration are saying ISIS is not a threat, even though they have actually made threats against military members, their families, and elected officials. So they are reaching here into the U.S. You look at what's happened in Canada and Oklahoma, all of in New York City with the axe attack on the police officers. All of them claim some type of alliance or connection to ISIS. So it is very dangerous. We must fund the Department of Homeland Security. However, there's a section of Homeland Security in the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement section where they're actually permitting the illegals that are here. That portion was taken out. We passed a funding bill in the first week in the House. In fact, some of the leadership brought me in and some other conservatives and said, what do you think we need to do? And we said, we need to fund the Department of Homeland Security. We need to defund the amnesty program. We need to make sure that ICE cannot use the fees that it's collected, because what the president is claiming is Congress has no authority over it because we collect fees. In fact, the Customs and Border Patrol is the second largest revenue generator in the nation. The IRS is number one, Customs and Border Patrol is number two. And so they kind of self-fund themselves. So we included in there that because the power of the purse belongs to Congress, we're wanting to assert that constitutional authority. The Constitution gives more authority to Congress than any other branch. We've advocated that in the past. We said we need to stand upon that constitutional authority, and we need to tell the administration that they can't even use their fees to fund this. We're going to totally shut this thing down. It passed overwhelmingly in the House, and it goes over to the Senate, where it's sitting right now. If you read the papers, most of the media will say the GOP is forcing a shutdown. The Democrats are filibustering that bill from even being heard, Democrats in the Senate. And at least, I think it was 9 of those publicly stated back when the president made his executive order, they thought it was unconstitutional and it was wrong policy. But they're filibustering the bill even being heard. In short, they're risking the safety and security of Americans just to advance their policy or stand by their party. So this is one of the things that's immediate. We're coming up on how many days? 9 days? 8 days until the funding runs out. Now, what does that mean if the funding runs out? Mission critical jobs would continue to work. So the Border Patrol would still be on the border, Coast Guard would still be operating. Our favorite people at the airport, TSA, will still be patting you down. So, however, at any point the administration could determine that TSA is no longer mission critical and cause backups at the airport. We saw that type of thing play out in the last government shutdown with the shutting down of the national monuments and the parks. And so we decided, as a member of the House Conservative Caucus, we decided that we weren't going to give in on this, that the national security is at risk. We've already lost over 500,000 American jobs, and they're wanting to give another 500,000 work permits out, this time strictly to those who came into this country illegally. 5 million, I'm sorry. Another 5 million. So it'd be 10.5 million jobs since 2009 that have gone to foreigners. Now, some of the 5.5 million that he gave out earlier were legal people here on work visas, but a big chunk of that had gone to those who were here illegally. Now, being on Homeland Security, one of the things that I said during the campaign, and that we said throughout, was when people would ask about what do we need to do about the immigration problem. Well, I always said, well, first we need to secure the border. Then we need to enforce the laws that we have on the books. We need to reform the work program so when people do come in, migrant labor does come in on a temporary basis, we know where they are, we know what they're doing, and we know when they leave. And if they don't leave, we know where they are. Then we'll look and see what other reforms needs to be done. So Homeland Security came out and said that's exactly what we need to do. We need to secure the border first. So before we started proceeding with the final bill, we took a trip to the border. I went to San Diego, looked at the California sector, we went to Arizona, and ended up in Texas. And one of the things that we learned out there was if you go to San Diego, they're doing it right. They have secured that sector of the border. The biggest threat we have right now on the border are the cartels. A lot of the human trafficking for jobs has slowed down because the economy is slow. We do know that they're getting ready to be a big surge if this amnesty program does go through. A court judge just recently put an injunction on it. But there will be another surge. The Border Patrol agents have told us that as soon as the weather gets better, and quite literally in McAllen, Texas is where we're seeing the surge of the families coming in. Said as soon as the weather gets better and the water isn't so cold, we're going to see another surge coming in. But the frustrating part to those agents, well, back over to San Diego, what we've seen there is they've secured that area and it's like a bubble. It's pushed them out to the other sectors. And so in the other sectors, they said, one of the biggest problems we have is lack of interior enforcement. When we catch these guys and we take them, now Border Patrol catches them, they go through a process, then they hand them over to ICE. ICE is responsible for adjudicating them, finding out who they are and sending them back across the border, putting them in jail, whatever they're going to do. He said the problem is, as we capture these folks, one of the first things in the protocol we ask them, are you here under a state of fear? Basically, are you here seeking amnesty? 4%. 4% say yes, they are. They hand them over to ICE. Under this administration, they're considered to have the legal rights of a citizen, so they're appointed a taxpayer-funded attorney. The attorneys teach them how to game the system. When the Border Patrol captures them, 4% claim amnesty. By the time they're interviewed by ICE after they met with the lawyers, 60%. 60% of them are claiming amnesty. This is destroying not only the security of our nation, but it's also harming the morale of the Border Patrol. Now, when we were there, of course, all the supervisors and those at higher levels in Department of Homeland Security were there when the congressional delegation was there. But I would grab a couple of the Border Patrol agents, step off to the side, get them off to themselves and talk to them. And one of them told me, he said, look, we can seal this border as tight as you want. They're still going to come in. I mean, one thing that they told us, whether it was Border Patrol, the ranchers who live along the border in Arizona, residents, the people who work and live around McAllen, Texas, all of them said, look, don't waste a lot of money on a fence. Physical fences don't stop them. They said as soon as the fences go up, the shovels come out, the ladders come out. Look, in one instance, we went where there's already a 12-foot tall steel fence. This is in Arizona. The local sheriff took us over there. He said, let me show you what happened just last week. Now, these are not individuals coming across the border. If you're an individual and you try to come across the American border, you're more than likely going to be captured and killed by the cartels because it's a $10,000 to $12,000 fee for them to bring you across the border. And if you try to come across without them bringing you, you're in big trouble. So it's the cartels that are doing the drug trafficking, they're doing weapons trafficking, possibly bringing terrorists across the border, as well as human trafficking. So he said, let me show you what happened with this physical fence. This is a local sheriff. He said, look, don't waste the money on the fence. We need boots on the ground. We need the technology. 12-foot high steel fence. It even has a steel I-beam about 4 feet off the ground as an anti-vehicle barrier. So you just can't take a vehicle and ram the fence and knock it down. He said, here's what happened. They pulled up. They had a laser saw. They cut it's like a steel mesh. They cut that part out. Then they used it to construct a ramp. They drove a Ford F-150 filled with narcotics and weapons over the top of that barricade and took off up the road. He said we caught them about 5 miles in because of some technology that they have out there. They said spending the money on the fence isn't going to work. All the fence does is slow them down to give us more time to react. And you're talking thousands and thousands of miles of fence, and the fence that's recommended runs about $2.5 million a mile. I'm sorry, $5.5 million a mile. And so, as the Border Patrol is telling us, look, we can seal this border. If we have the right technology, which we've identified technology, and we distribute it sector by sector because each sector is unique. We have boots on the ground, use our National Guard. What part of the Border Patrol bill uses the National Guard, boots on the ground. We can really cut down on the amount of the traffickers coming across the border. He said, but until we deal with the interior enforcement and the enticement for them to come across the border, nothing we do is going to make any sense. It's not going to make a difference. And so that's one of the reasons that we've been focused on. We have to make sure, first of all, what the president did was unconstitutional, is outside the bounds of the Constitution. But also, it's terrible policy. When we have slow job growth, we have people that are underemployed, and we're getting a study done right now on the number of Americans that are currently underemployed. And even the Congressional Budget Office is saying the suppression of wage increases right now is due because of the saturation of the job market has overwhelmed the growth of our economy. And basically we've imported, which if this goes through, will be 10.5 million foreign workers into a job market where Americans are looking to better themselves. That's just one of the issues. We know Obamacare has really impacted everybody. My small business, it really impacted my business. My employees are now paying more than twice what they did for health care, which was with less of a plan. We did pass a bill that totally repealed it. We know that the Senate may or may not take it up, but the president will veto it. But we've also taken some steps to peel away portions of it. One thing we did for the veterans is we passed a bill, still to be taken up from the Senate, that allows employers to accept TRICARE, which is the military health care system now. My son, who's in the National Guard, he is on TRICARE. The way, until now, what that would do is if you were a veteran and you were still under TRICARE, under Obamacare, you had to be put under the exchanges. So they had to give up the TRICARE and go under the exchange. And so it was causing employers, because the cost of Obamacare to the employers were so high, it was suppressing the ability for veterans to get jobs. So we passed a bill in the House that would allow TRICARE to replace Obamacare. Another thing that we did with, it was the second bill that we passed dealing with Obamacare. Oh, the 40-hour work week. Yep. When Obamacare passed, up until Obamacare, it was always the standard of that 40 hours of work a week was considered full-time. When Obamacare passed, that got changed to 30 hours. That was one of the things that really hit especially small businesses, because you know they had a threshold. If you had, I think, 50 employees, full-time employees, then you had to go into the exchanges. You had to provide health insurance, or you had to put them on the exchange. So that really hurt a lot of businesses. Some of them went and said, look, all we can do is then put you on part-time, so you're only going to work 15 to 20 hours a week. So they were needing relief. So we passed a bill that put that back into 40 hours per week. Been several other pieces of legislation similar to that we passed. We did some tax credits aimed at helping businesses that are in the food services industry. If they donate their excess inventory to soup kitchens or those into charities, then they'll get a tax break on those. We've passed a dozen bills dealing with human trafficking. And so our Border Security bill we're holding until the Judiciary Committee comes out with an actual interior enforcement bill. Because what we don't, even though we know we got to seal the border, it doesn't do any good to spend that taxpayer money if it's not going to have an effect. So we're waiting on Judiciary Committee, should be coming out with a bill very soon to end the catch and release program. One of the things that we saw, one of the technologies that the Border Patrol is using is a technology we're bringing back from Afghanistan. They're basically helium-filled blimps that are tethered to the ground. They have radars in them, some of them have cameras, and they're all facing toward Mexico. And what they're doing is they're watching for, it's obvious when someone is planning to come across the border, because during the day they go stage themselves. And so in the past what they would do is they would notice that illegals were coming across. They would stage themselves, so they would go ahead and get Border Patrol agents in place. So as soon as they crossed the border, boom, they were on them. And so we saw several videos of when they're doing that, and they're still doing that if they're carrying narcotics or weapons. They can usually tell with the cameras. They're carrying backpacks. They're on them. But because of the catch and release program, the two things that we're seeing that has changed, if it's a female with a child, they no longer sneak across the border. Well, they sneak across the river in McAllen, Texas, and then they just casually walk to the closest intersection on a highway and they stand there. Because they know if they get captured, they're going to stay in the country. If it's males, they're still partially being sent back into Mexico. So the Border Patrol has changed their tactics, but because a number of them are given amnesty here, they've learned how to game our system. Instead of going and capturing them and detaining them, like they used to sneak up, they'd wait till they come in and they'd be on them, they would detain them, they would take them, process them, and send them back across the border. What they're doing now is instead of sneaking up, they're using dirt bikes and four-wheelers and vehicles that make a lot of noise. So they watch when they come across on the cameras. The Border Patrol agents come in making all this noise, and it causes them to turn and run back across the border. He said that's the best thing we can do. Because if we capture them, it's more likely they're going to end up staying here because of the current policies. So as soon as Judiciary comes out with their bill, we're going to be moving the border security bill and the interior enforcement bill through. So anyhow, that's kind of a highlight of the things that have been going on. When we get back this next week, we're going to be looking at an education bill. We're still analyzing it. Easton, heading up our legislative shop, they're poring over it this week. What's 600 pages?
597.
597 pages. So.
Luckily, I think I just got to 352. So
okay.
Really, I'm almost there.
191.
And so, one other big bill everybody's probably aware of is the Keystone Pipeline. We passed it overwhelmingly. We even got bipartisan support to pass Keystone. The president's already said, the Senate passed it. They made one simple change to it, sent it back to us. Basically, the change that the Senate made was acknowledging that we have weather, right? Some of the Democrats wanted to have a statement in there about global warming, but it was worded as such that says there is climate change, which we all know there is. I mean, in 1975, a headline of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution said, "The coming ice age." I mean, it's been cyclical for all, ever since history. We have normal cycles in weather patterns. And so the Senate worded it that basically all it says, we acknowledge there's cycles in weather patterns. And so that pacified them. We passed the Keystone Pipeline. With one stroke of the pen, the president could create 40,000 jobs. But he's saying he's going to veto that, and he's calling on the Democrats to filibuster the bill that is going to give 5 million more American jobs away. So we need folks. You're here. Really glad you're here. We need you to be calling to the Senate and be calling the White House and say, look, this isn't a partisan issue. This is a common sense issue. We need the Keystone Pipeline. A good illustration is the train wreck.
Yeah.
The way they're getting the oil now is putting it on rail cars. Who's holding this thing up is the environmentalists, because they're afraid there may be a pipeline leak. And we've said all along it is much more dangerous putting that stuff on trains and transporting it. So that's pretty much where we are right now, and I want to hear from you guys. So that's what we want to do. I'm going to let Rob speak, because doing town halls in the past, we want to make sure we got it orderly and everybody that wants to ask a question gets a chance to. So we came up with just a couple of
I've just got a couple of brief guidelines here. Before I do, I saw we had an elected official sneak in a sweat coat back there. School board member Craig Kittle is observing the town hall, and we have from Emerson, I'm sorry, the mayor, here with us.
You
and,
got one right here too.
Yeah.
From New Harlem.
And Craig from you, Harlem. So elected officials, they kind of snuck in and observed from the back of the room very wisely from the back of the room.
We're all Baptists.
Baptists, they are. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the questions from here. We have a microphone so the audience can hear your question. What we're going to do is we're going to invite row by row to come up. If you want to ask a question, we'll start with these front rows and work our way back. And they listed here that if you do hear your question asked, if you wouldn't mind to go ahead and you can go ahead at that point and take your seat. And if we happen to run out of time, if everybody in the room wants to ask a question, we may have an issue with time, but you're welcome to. And if we run out of time, we have a table out there to, if your question doesn't get answered or you don't feel it get answered, leave it with us and make sure that we engage in a conversation going back and forth. But for now, what we'll do is, I think we'll start with this row over here. Do you folks have a question on that side? I'll let you ask them right there, sir.
Okay, I don't need a microphone anyway. To tell you who I am. I'm Al Farwell. I'm a veteran of World War II. I was a volunteer. It seems everybody talks about getting these bills to the president's desk so he can veto them. They don't seem to be getting there. Right. It seems like there ought to be more cooperation between the House and the Senate. Yes. There used to be there, and there's nothing in our Constitution said that it's Democrats and Republicans up there. It's one nation under God.
Absolutely.
And
right.
Let's do something about it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for your service. My dad was in Europe in World War II as a medic, and we really appreciate you. Yeah, no, hey, these guys have heard me say the same thing. I walked into the office after being there 2 weeks, and I sat down and I said, "This is the craziest place I've ever seen in my life." And the structure that has happened over the years has breeded more partisanship than it has before. Just like I said, what we're facing right now in the Senate with the Department of Homeland Security funding bill, there are approximately 9 Democrats who have publicly said they oppose the president's actions. They know that we need to fund Homeland Security. Basically, they agree with the bill, but they're siding with the Democrats, even though they disagree with it. And I've had a history of partying with my own party in the State House and State Senate. I have a couple of times on the floor already, but I can tell you that I've been encouraged with some things that are happening. We have seen a little more bipartisanship. It's going to take time and a little more turnover to get over that. But there are several that what we have to do is get across that we all want what's good for America. And when I ran, I said, look, the only reason I'm running is my children, my granddaughters deserve better than what we're passing on to them. And you're exactly right, but the structure that has happened over the past several years breeds partisanship. I'll give you just a quick example. When we were there for new member orientation, pretty much most of the new member orientation happened, the Republicans went over here, and the Democrats went over here. Wait, I did that backwards. Right. So the Democrats went over here, and Republicans went over here. We didn't interact very much. And so there's a lot in the new members in the Democrat caucus that I still don't know. I don't even know their names. And so when the committee assignments happen at the state level, at State House and State Senate, either the speaker or a committee takes everybody, Democrats and Republicans, and they sort them out in the different committees. In Congress, the Republicans assign their committees and Democrats assign theirs. And so it breeds partisanship. We sit separately on the floor. We sit separately in committee. And so one of the things that we've been doing is going across the aisle. I'll walk over to the other side of the house and just introduce myself to people. We had an event screening of the movie Selma. And so my wife and I showed up. There were maybe 4 or 5 Republicans there. Spent some time talking to John Lewis, because even though I don't agree with the policy of John Lewis, he did fight for his freedom. And he was very brave to do what he did in Selma. And so there's a lot of things that we share in common. In fact, I did read today that they're reenacting the march in Selma next month, and there are more Republicans going to that march than there ever has in history before. So we're starting to, and this is what I tell our colleagues, look, we can't just wait for the other side to do this. We have to go to them and convince them that the policies that we're trying to pass are the right policies. And so I appreciate your comment. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Excuse me. My presiding elder up at my church, I'm required to be at that meeting, so I have to leave.
Well, thank you for coming, though.
Do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know that's why I'm leaving.
On the front row here.
Yeah.
Want to make you aware, last year the ATF reinterpreted a federal law to ban the importation of Russian military surplus ammo.
Okay. 7.62 for SKS and.
No, it's 5.45.
Okay.
For the AK-74.
Okay.
Last week they just reinterpreted the same federal law to ban the civilian use of U.S. military surplus ammo. That's the M855. So the ammo I just bought today at Walmart is not going to be available to civilians.
Can you, Easton, raise your hand? Can you go to Easton and give us some information about that? And we're going to look into it. One of the things that we're seeing, and I'm working with another congressman on a bill called the RAD Act. And RAD is...
I don't remember the exact acronym, but it's basically...
It is repeal of... anyhow,
yeah.
Of course, we have SWAT teams in our law enforcement community. Tactical teams that go in critical situations. We also have SWAT teams in the IRS, the EPA, the Department of Education, the Bureau of Land Management. Throughout the history of this nation, those are not law enforcement agencies. They are policy. They are regulatory agencies. Regulatory Agency Disarmament Bill. That's it. Regulatory Agency Disarmament Bill. There is no reason the Department of Education needs to have a full tactical SWAT team. There was an instance recently where the EPA stormed a home, I believe they were in Massachusetts, with a full SWAT team because they had a Land Rover that didn't meet the U.S. EPA standards. The new senator from Alaska was telling me that he's sponsoring the same bill in the Senate. EPA came into a family that was mining, and they did, with helicopters and everything, come in because they thought they were mining illegally, and they weren't. But they used, I mean, tell how many hundreds of thousands of dollars with helicopters and SWAT teams, tactical gear, coming in on these families. Throughout the history of this nation, when we had a regulatory agency that really had a compelling issue, they had probable cause that there was a violation of a federal law, they would go to the local law enforcement, the sheriff, who's responsible to you, and the sheriff would make the determination of how they needed to go and deal with that issue. So we're introducing the RAD Act. It was introduced in the 113th Congress. We're introducing it, working on it right now, going to co-sponsor it. It's just one of the other issues that we're going to try to constrain the federal government. I will tell you this, I was meeting with the FBI director who was saying they're having a hard time recruiting quality candidates and getting the equipment they need, and I said, well, it could be because all these other agencies are taking the folks that you need. He said, oh, I didn't know they were doing that. And so, I'm not so sure if he didn't know or he was just saying that.
Yeah.
But if you get with Easton.
Sure, how about just disband the ATF? They were formed to go after Al Capone.
Yeah. And there's a lot of agencies, and it's a good point, it's about repealing the ATF. Agencies like the EPA were regulatory agencies that were designed to come up with policies that were sent to the states, and the states were the primary enforcement. But what we've seen is this massive growth of the federal government, way beyond what anything that our founders envisioned, and way beyond anything that we can sustain. I mean, with an $18 trillion debt, we can't sustain some of these things. So for us to balance the budget, we have to start peeling back, either getting rid of some of these agencies or reducing their fingerprints or their footprints so much that we're re-empowering the states to take over some of the enforcement of that.
Yeah, also, in this case, it seems to me that since our president couldn't pass an assault weapons ban, now he's trying to ban the ammunition. Military.
And he's already shown he's willing to go outside.
Reducing the budget.
Well, thank you. If you get with Easton now.
More questions on the front row? Anybody here?
Are we limited to one question?
Yes, sir, at this rate, yes, sir.
Boy, I don't know which one to jump on first.
The easy one. You want to throw the softball here today.
That had some political overtones. Well, let me take the first one that's of paramount importance. 18 U.S.C. 1504 is a criminal statute that makes it a crime to address a grand jury in a case they are considering. I have no problem with that. The second paragraph says, though, that that's the language in the first paragraph is not to be construed to prohibit any citizen from communicating with the grand jury. I think the specific phrase is grand jury foreman. However, in reality, in fact, to my knowledge, every United States attorney in the district courts in this nation has someone assigned to prevent an individual from going to a grand jury foreman and informing them of crimes under the authority of 18 U.S.C. 4, and you do know what 4 says. 4 says you have a duty. If the government finds out you knew about a federal felony and you didn't tell somebody in authority, you can be prosecuted for a felony, which that's different than Georgia's law. So my question to you is what are you going to do? Are you going to initiate a impeachment resolution or request an impeachment inquiry into United States attorneys and their offices obstructing citizens in getting to the power of a grand jury for the purpose of getting their grievances resolved?
Well,
And by the way, this just happened out in Fort Worth.
But as you know, to take on an action like that, there has to be some type of standing. You just can't introduce an impeachment cause without some type of cause. So you said that there is an instance going on. And
it already happened.
Yeah,
the very specifics are, the man went personally. He was intercepted by an assistant United States attorney, and he was told, send a letter, we'll see it gets to the foreman, maybe it will, maybe it won't, we don't know. And so he goes back home, and he writes his letter, and he writes out a reason why he wants to speak to the foreman about the specifics of the crime. Now, instead of mailing it United States first class, he sends it certified restricted delivery, which means, and it was addressed, foreman, United States District Court Grand Jury, Northern District of Texas, Fort Worth Division. And he handed it to the post office. They delivered it, got the carrier, got to the courthouse, and it was refused. But not by the foreman.
Hey, Easton. Sir? When we get done, we'll get with Paul and get some details. That can get very technical. And so I know this has been a passion of yours for over the years. So.
Thank you, Barry.
All right.
Congressman.
No, it's Barry. I'll let Congressman in D.C.
Morris.
You talked about the threat of ISIS, and I totally agree it's a tremendous threat. But we also have one here, the Muslim Brotherhood has penetrated our government. It's in the Department of Homeland Security, under which you have purview. Penetrated into the Countering Violent Extremism Working Group in the Department of Homeland Security. What are we doing about it?
We actually started a series of hearings, and one of the things that, one of the challenges that we have, you're familiar with the missing emails with Lois Lerner? We have several instances of contempt with Congress. In fact, there was a discussion before the State of the Union of what because of holding Eric Holder in contempt, what role will the House play if he shows up on the House floor for the State of the Union, because he's been held in legal contempt of U.S. Congress, and there was discussion that, will the Sergeant at Arms arrest him? But they checked with some of the attorneys. They said some other things are going on. But that's just an illustration of how the administration is basically balked on the subpoena powers of the U.S. Congress, and it's in some cases almost impossible. Trey Gowdy's a good friend of mine doing the Benghazi case. He's probably doing a better job of drilling in on all this. We're going to be issuing more subpoenas in the Homeland Security Committee. So far, we've had elements of the different departments that are under the purview of Homeland Security. We've had the FBI, we've had the National Counterterrorism Center come in and testify. It's been very surface level things, but one of the problems we have is the Muslim Brotherhood, was it CARE Center for Islamic American Studies, they have White House access. Some of those are actually on the President's National Security Advisory team. The irony in all this that I just found out the other day, United Arab Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, a Muslim country, just issued their terrorist watch list. Muslim Brotherhood, Center for American Islamic Council. They are on the watch list, but yet they have access to the White House. These are the challenges we're facing. I just saw on the schedule today that we have another round of hearings coming up. We had one last week.
Also, your foreign fighters is going to be announced.
Is it? Okay. Homeland Security, did they end up, have they announced if I was going to be on that?
We're still putting together the final details of what we're talking about.
We are putting together a task force under the Committee on Homeland Security to look into more details of this, as well as the foreign fighters, the problem of American citizens traveling overseas and fighting with ISIS, joining Muslim Brotherhood or one of the other, Al-Qaeda, and then coming back to the U.S. One of the things that I've been advocating is, traditionally in American history, you go and fight with an enemy of the U.S., then you're a traitor. You've lost your citizenship, which you should be arrested the moment that you come back into the nation.
Absolutely.
So I don't have a solid answer for you because it's hard to get the information out of the White House. They refuse to cooperate. When they do show up to hearings, half the time the attorneys are saying, you can't answer that. And so we have expanded the subpoena powers of committees. We shifted it around to where there can be less blocking by the minority party for subpoena power. So then 6 weeks in, we realize it's an issue, and so we're going to be digging deeper. I don't know the answer or the solution, but we're trying to find out. Thank you for the question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I had a quick question. You mentioned that San Diego was doing a good job with the border. What are they doing differently?
It's really two different environments. When you look at San Diego, you have a highly densely populated area. So you have San Diego here, you have Tijuana on the other side. Both are heavily densely populated. Because of that, that was the primary area for trafficking drugs, trafficking humans, cartels, whatever, because of the dense population. So the effort was put in that area of securing the border. And so there were adequate number of Border Patrol agents put there. Technology, now one of the fences, there's 2 layers, there's a double layer fence there, which they need in a densely populated area. Because when you think about it, if somebody's coming from Tijuana into San Diego, literally, once they get through the fence, in 100 yards they can assimilate into the community and you'll never find them. So the idea of the fences are to slow them down. So we have 2 layers of fence. We have one that was built in the 60s with Korea War era runway, emergency runway material, solid steel panels. It's about 12 feet tall. On the other side is a steel mesh fence with a road going down the middle and a drainage ditch. All along there we have stadium lighting, we have camera systems, we have remote sensors that can even pick up a rabbit running. The whole idea is when they come across, They can pick them up, deploy an agent to intercept them before they have the chance to get through the 2 fences. One of the Border Patrol agents, actually from Georgia, he told me, we watched a guy one day throw a ladder over the steel fence. And they do need to replace that fence because it's solid and Border Patrol can't see what's going on the other side. So guys will get down against the fence where the cameras can't see them. And so part of the Border Security bill was to replace that with a mesh fence so they can see through it. So he threw a ladder, jumped over, had a battery-powered reciprocating saw, walked over to the other steel fence, took an axe, made a notch in it, cut a loop out of it, kicked it in, and was on the other side in less than 2 minutes. They also there's Constantine wire on top of the inner fence. They've shown some of the makeshift ladders that they've used, and they throw a blanket up over the top, and they just scoot over the top of it. Throw a ladder down on the other side, a rope ladder, and climb down. They said, this is why we're saying physical fences don't work. They're going to go over it, they're going to go under it. They actually showed us a tunnel system. Now, this is an expertly engineered tunnel system. Okay, the cartels have a lot of money. They're taking engineers. They have people coming over here going to American colleges, going back and engineering these tunnel systems for them.
Like the ones in Israel.
Yeah, exactly. On the Mexican side, there was a bathroom in a warehouse. You open the door, there's a toilet there. If you knew where the switch was, it's almost like Indiana Jones. You flip the switch, the toilet and the whole floor was on a hydraulic lift that lowered 40 feet down to the entrance of the tunnel. And the tunnel went into the U.S., into a warehouse over there. It was 90 feet deep with an elevator system. They actually had a rail system in there that they would cart the drugs, the weapons, and the wheels were made out of nylon, so it was quiet. It was the human intelligence aspect is how they found that, and they actually caught that before they got the drugs in. The Border Patrol found out about it, brought a drug enforcement agency in, the local sheriff, police, and basically they staked out the warehouse and waited until they brought the first level of dope in, and they got it. But that's what they're saying. This isn't just a bunch of folks that are living in huts and they want to come across the border. Those people are being caught and punished by the cartels. This is high dollar, big time organized crime that we're dealing with. So we put the resources in San Diego. But what it's done is it's pushed them out into the other sectors. In fact, in San Diego, you can stand and you can watch the fence go up a mountain and the fence ends. Up on this mountain, and I asked the Border Patrol, I said, why does the fence end there? He said, because that's the easiest place to catch them, because it's all desert up there. When they come across that, it takes them a full day just to cross that desert. That's the easiest place to catch them. Nobody crosses there. What they're doing now is putting them on boats. They're going out as these small fishing boats. They're going out as far as 250 miles offshore and coming in as far up as San Francisco. So we need to do what we did there in the Arizona sector and in the Texas sector.
Why don't we learn something from Afghanistan and that of putting IUDs in the ground? Blow them up.
Well, because there's a lot of Americans that work and kids around the border as well. And so,
well, warn them ahead of time. Don't go near there.
Okay. I'm not looking for in-depth answers. Let's see. I'm concerned about political correctness, and
right.
From everything that I'm reading, and with what Obama is trying to keep us from speaking truth to this Islamic threat, I think time is of the essence. I don't think we have a lot of time to dilly-dally. He's only got a short amount of time, and he seems to have his pedal to the metal. You know what I mean? So, you know, I guess my question is this: how do you get your information? How are the threats brought to the Homeland Security? Does it go through some kind of political correct filter?
A lot of the times we're getting briefed from the supervisors of agents in the field. They're with us. Their hands are tied by the political correctness, but they kind of speak in enough code that we know what they're saying. We also have classified briefings. We have a SCIF, which is a Secure Department of Information facility, which I worked in the Air Force and intelligence, that we do get classified briefings when things are really sensitive. But I did challenge we had a couple of folks testifying in our last hearing that I could tell they were having to talk. There have been people in the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI fired because they used the term extreme Islamic terrorist. So they kind of talk around the issue. And we'll get our folks to email you a link to the video where I was challenging these guys. And basically I said, look, when I was in the military and we had an enemy, if you were going to defeat that enemy in the long term, now we're not talking about a tactical battle, but strategically, you had to understand the ideology. You had to get to the root of what they were thinking. Ronald Reagan understood this with the Soviet Union. You have to get to the ideology. The administration refuses to acknowledge that the ideology is extreme Islamic terrorism, and we're never going to defeat it until we can actually identify that.
But there's a reason for that, and his rhetoric does not match his actions, and I hope that you guys don't listen to what he's saying, watch what he's doing.
And that's true, and that's what we're trying to do, is get to those guys that are in the field, understand what they're telling us, because they're scared for their jobs, and it shouldn't be that way.
Scared for America.
Yeah, and so you're right. We have to identify what the ideology is. I mean,
we know what it is. Obama just doesn't.
Egypt and Jordan understand what it is.
Yeah.
It's an extreme version of their own religion. The United Arab Emirates understands what it is. We just, for some reason, won't acknowledge it.
Okay. My turn. I have 4 issues that all kind of tie together, and that people have asked me to find out about your stance on. One is coming up very soon, and that's net neutrality. And that, I guess, the vote's going to be on the 26th of February. And we need to know where you stand on net neutrality, on American law for American courts, on Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and on Common Core.
Okay, let's take these in reverse. Common Core, one of the, totally opposed to Common Core. It's totally a state's issue. Common Core is, I mean, I co-authored the bill in the state Senate to get us out of Common Core. One of the things we're being told of the education bill coming out, and we're still looking at it, just because we're being told this doesn't mean it's there, that it does defund any aspect of the Federal Department of Education funding Common Core. So opposed to Common Core.
And we've co-sponsored a bill with Congressman Joe Wilson that is preventing, it's separate from the overall education bill, but it's a bill that solely deals with making sure that the government cannot bribe states into coming into Common Core or force blackmail them into Common Core, to use, simple.
Is net neutrality coming up this week?
It's on its way.
Okay.
The 26th.
No, the government doesn't need to be involved in the internet whatsoever. I mean, if you look at the advancement of the technology that we have in the video sector and technology, I mean, the internet speeds at Jerry Drum. I was in IT business for years.
He has a pen and he has a phone.
He has a pen and a phone.
And he said that he will mandate it whether the
Right.
Congress goes along with it or not.
And he may try to do that, and he's going to. But we've got some folks looking at right now, how can he's going to regulate whatever he can. And so what were the other 2?
Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Yes. That's a state issue, the RFRA. I don't know if I kind of dominated the news yesterday and part of today. Chief Cochran, we authored a letter, got some of our members to sign on, basically asking the mayor, he needs to hire the guy back. He was fired for his beliefs, not from his actions. And so we're supporting it. We already have the language of RFRA is already federal law, but the state does need to pass it.
And what about American laws for American courts?
Getting rid of, making sure Sharia law doesn't happen
Any foreign law.
Any foreign law, absolutely.
Are you working on anything? Are they working on anything like that?
A lot of that's done at the state level. Do we have anything going
No,
at the
it's
federal
federal
level?
and state.
I haven't seen a text of anything at the moment.
Most of the work is
I-
being done at the state levels on those
I
courts, but
understand
even
that,
in the
but
federal
federal
court.
law is trying to trump it.
We'll find out if that goes mostly through the Judiciary Committee, so
Okay.
we're looking at that. So.
Yes, sir.
There's been a lot of legislation and a lot of talk concerning the VA. and the funding that we have. It seems like they're not moving very fast. And I don't know if we're expecting too much, if the wheels of Congress are just moving slowly. I've heard talk that $10 billion has been allocated toward helping the veterans find outside positions. They're trying to reallocate that to something else. What can we do to make sure that these monies to the veterans get to where they need to be?
Yeah, and if there's been any reallocation so far, been in the president's budget proposal, which we just got, and so our budget committee is working on that. And, you know, the president's budget proposal is pretty much a suggestion, and we're just going to take it and reallocate it where we want to. We did pass a bill this session already dealing with veterans to, it gives a tax incentive to doctors, not a tax incentive, but we will repay a portion of the education cost if a doctor will come and work in the VA to try to bring more doctors in the VA. It's passed the House, it's still in the Senate. There's a lot of work to do. There's some long-term things that we're looking at doing, is offering a voucher type system instead of just using the VA. Give the option for veterans to use a voucher and go into the community to get their care. And so as a veteran myself, that's something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. But make sure we get your contact information. I don't know all that's going on in the Veterans Affairs Committee, but I know it's a priority.
Well, I just got my card. The card that they're sending out.
Yeah.
If you can't get to a doctor soon enough, I guess you can go outside of the system.
Right.
And so things are happening, but it just seems like they're not happening very fast.
Right, and it does move. So one of the problems we have that we've been talking about is you can't fire anybody in the federal government. And most of these employees know that. Once they're vested, you just can't get rid of them. And so one of the things I think we need to do is repeal that law, is that if you're not performing, you're not going to go again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That would eliminate the IRS.
Congressman, do you feel after 6 weeks of being in Washington that your colleagues have any grasp of the enormity of the burden of the debt that we're passing on to my children and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren? There is no way currently to repay that debt without massive confiscation and taxes and combination of a whole lot of other things that all of us in this room will find terribly unsatisfactory. And ISIS is a problem. They can only kill us.
Right.
This debt can destroy the republic.
Yeah, $18 trillion in debt. Let me answer that. Yes, some do. Some also understand the reality of it. It's not going to go away tomorrow. But it's never going to go away if we don't take the action to start doing something, which is Congress has to stop deficit spending.
The last two presidents have spent probably $14 trillion of that, or been responsible for the $14 trillion of that 18 trillion.
During the State of the Union address, the President laid out another just huge deficit from cradle to grave program. The two things that have to happen, our budget committee right now, Tom Price, Congressman Tom Price, chairman of the budget committee, his objective is to come up with a budget that balances the budget within 10 years. And if, of course, we can come up with a budget plan that does that, but then the next Congress can come in here and undo it. One of the things that we're working on is a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which I think we have to have, with some exceptions carved out for wartime spending, emergencies. That's what typically Congress has used debt spending before, is World War I, World War II. You got to have a little bit of flexibility in there, but it has to be very limited. We have been looking at, it's hard to get a balanced budget amendment passed because, quite frankly, these guys up there, they don't want to give up the control. It's going to take some time, and we can sustain it. We can't, there's no way we can pay it off right now, but with a combination of things, with a surge in the economy, if we can, we've even looked at domestic oil production. If we get there's probably enough revenue there to make a serious dent in that debt if we just let American companies produce American oil. So it's a whole combination of things, but you have to have a catalyst to get this going. And one of the things we're working on is a balanced budget amendment that requires that Congress operate in a balanced budget by a certain time, like the year 2025 or 2030. Congress loves kicking the can down the road. All we're going to do is build a backstop. We think there's a good chance of getting something like that passed. That gives a deadline that says, okay, by this date, we have to balance the budget and make a significant impact on the debt. And that becomes a catalyst for tax reform. It becomes a catalyst for regulatory reform to get the federal government off the backs of businesses so they can hire some more to stimulate the economy. It's going to take all of these factors together. Just to give you an idea, if y'all didn't hear this back during all the campaign, to understand how big our debt is. I don't care what religious background you are, you don't have religion at all, but if you know what today's date is, you know when Jesus was born, right? If you were to go back to the moment that Christ was born, and you put away $16,000 every minute, $16,000 every 60 seconds since the birth of Christ, you still wouldn't have $18 trillion today. That's how massive the debt is. The payment on the interest rate alone was enough to buy almost, about 2,000 F-35 fighters.
Well, that alone speaks to the problem. I mean, as long as we have a dollar standard for oil, we probably can kick the can further down the road, but that day will come when it's not.
And the thing you look at, there's no way we can pay it off now, but if we have a target and a goal and a vision of getting there, that's when you can, but you've got to have a starting point, and that's what we're looking at.
It's an enormous problem. I was just wanting to get from you a sense of, is there awareness of this gargantuan gorilla in the room?
And from a certain segment there is. There's about 40 of us that have started a caucus, the House Conservative Caucus, and we meet once a week. And we had, since we're recessed, we had a conference call yesterday, and what we're doing is picking up these issues, and we're collectively coming together and working on solutions, and then pushing to get them done.
Thank you.
We're going row by row, sir. Yes, sir.
Congressman, you were over in Rome for our retirement when you were done.
Right.
And our lady that invited you, Carol, she talked with you about several things that we were of interest of.
Right.
And we just was here, several of us, to remind you that we still have those things.
Okay.
On our insurance,
right,
retirement insurance, and the CPI that's used, we would like to just stay with the old rather than change to some of the new.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, Easton is going to be here. Just to reiterate, Easton handles our legislative affairs and issues like that, and he'll be glad. We also have two others that work in the shop, Caroline and Colin, who are dedicated to deal with legislative issues. And Crystal handles the constituent issues. If you're mad at the IRS because they did you wrong, you call Crystal. If you're mad at the IRS because you want them to change their ways, then you talk to Easton. So, we have really put a team together and been proactive. Some of our guys have already left to go out. We want to get into the community and say, look, we're here to help. We're going to fix a problem if we can. And we're going to at least twist as many arms as we can to get a solution. But in the long term, legislatively, that's where Easton is helping us, getting our legislative agenda, reading the bills. Yes, some of us actually read the stuff before we vote on them. So we appreciate that.
Yes, on that road.
The Dodd-Frank bill, is there anything happening on it? Because I feel like it's one of the things that's held our economy back more than anything.
It is.
You know, used to you could go to a bank if you had an ideal, even if you didn't have a lot of money, you could usually get a bank if you have good character, you could get a loan, you could start a business. Mm-hmm. And with the Dodd-Frank bill, the only body can qualify for the loans is people that really don't need the loans. And they're not the ones that's going to take risk. Starting these young people. And the Dodd-Frank bill, I'm from Kentucky, I was a banker for 12 years, but the Dodd-Frank bill We didn't have a recession in the little town I was from in Kentucky until the Dodd-Frank bill, and I go back to Kentucky, and all of a sudden, you know, banks weren't making loans to build houses anymore. We had fewer houses for sale than we'd ever had, but the Dodd-Frank bill said, all right, banks, you can't make these loans anymore.
Right.
And I think that what the Dodd-Frank bill did need to do some control of the big banks, but what it actually did, it put the big banks like Bank of America, and they come into small towns and take over all the small banks.
Right.
Like we've got Bank of America, Wells Fargo, BB&T. I mean, the Dodd-Frank bill gave us the banks too big to fail. And we're still standing right there with the Dodd-Frank bill. I think it's a terrible law.
Yeah, and one of the things we're working on, in Carrick, raise your hand, Carrick used to be a community banker. But we don't have community banks anymore because of Dodd-Frank. And you're right, I've said this many times. I remember when I was a kid, the old adage was you could only borrow money if you prove you don't need it. And we're kind of back to that scenario again. One of the things that we're looking at, again, once laws get in, it is tough. I mean, honestly, you saw at the state level, it's that much tougher at the federal level because you have all these big corporations that totally change their operation to fit the new law. That's why we're trying to do something with Obamacare before it gets totally settled. It's still fresh enough, and there's been enough court challenges that a lot of corporations haven't fully just bought into the Obamacare. It's sort of like when you pour concrete, if you keep agitating enough, pour water in it, it doesn't set too fast. And so that's what we're trying to do, is keep enough water going in the concrete so it doesn't set. Dodd-Frank, however, man, it just went in and they adopted the program. So one of the things we're working on and some others are working on is passing a bill that exempts smaller banks from some of the more onerous, because those are the ones that are hurting the small businesses. The big businesses, you know, those guys can absorb some of the overhead and costs, and a lot of banks can absorb the additional costs. But it's the small banks, the community banks, the ones that are suffering. That's why so many of them have shut down. So one of the approaches we're looking at is, I describe it this way. If you got a machine that you want to destroy, you can walk up with a sledgehammer and you can beat on that thing forever until you destroy it. Or you can sneak in and pull a couple of key pins out of some gears until it just stops working and it destructs itself. And so that's one of the approaches that we're looking at, is if you could remove some of those key factors that are holding back the small businesses, they can regenerate themselves. You're going to see the other banks come back and say, hey, it works for them, you know, free us back up again too. But you're right, there was some regulation that needed to happen on the big mortgage as well. But that's what we're looking at doing, is reforming it to put some type of level that says if you're under this amount of asset, then this doesn't apply.
Personal?
One of the things that's very dear to my heart, and anybody that's known me at the time knows that I'm concerned about all the babies we've killed in the last 30 years.
Right.
There's an act called the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. And according to my information here, it says that our newly elected officials have refused to move this bill forward. Is that true, and what is your position on it?
Partially. Let me give you the two sides of what happened in that bill. The bill was scheduled to come to the floor on the day of the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. There was a huge pro-life rally at the Capitol. There were some folks that were working behind the scenes to not pass that bill. So I don't know exactly why the bill was pulled, and another bill that just prohibits Obamacare from funding abortions went to the floor. You know, it was a symbolic gesture. There's argument that that's already been done. One of the problems that we have in getting things that no one's more pro-life than I am. I champion most of the pro-life legislation at the state legislature. The Constitution clearly states, the government, or the Declaration of Independence clearly states, government exists to protect our rights. The most basic right is the right of life. Thomas Jefferson penned that into the Declaration of Independence. He was quoting William Blackstone, who had said that the basic right of life that is given by God is receives the very first and the most ardent protection by government, and that begins, as he said, quickening in the womb. And so our founding fathers identified we have to protect life. But if we're going to accomplish anything, we have to quit shooting each other. One of the reasons that bill didn't come to the floor was because there was a pro-life group up there advocating against it. That's one of the reasons I told our staff, this is the craziest place I've ever seen. We've got conservative Tea Party groups protesting against the Secure Our Borders bill, and we've got pro-life groups protesting against the pro-life bill. Because there was one aspect of it they didn't like. And they said, if we can't get it all, we don't want any of it. And that would, there were some exceptions I didn't like in there. But even the most moderate pro-life groups are saying this would probably save 99% of the babies. That's one of the reasons it was pulled, is because even the conservatives were shooting each other. They attacked me on the radio here because I said I would vote for the bill. So we're being told the bill is going to come back up. Have we heard any more, Easton, about when?
No, sir.
Okay. But that I believe we're going to bring that bill back up. It may look a little bit different. Hopefully it's going to look better. But if we're going to get anything done, we got to kind of all move in the same direction.
The thing that I've learned in my years is, you know, a lot of our rights and everything have been lost through incrementalism.
Yes.
We can gain them back by incrementalism too. If we can pass something now, maybe we'll get a better deal later on.
Exactly.
But we've got to start doing this.
And I've always heard, well, you can't let the camel's nose under the tent. Well, what about our camel?
Right.
Why can't our camel get its nose under the tent? It works both ways, and you're exactly right. But you know, Rob will keep you up to date of where it is, because we definitely are going to need support to get that bill on the floor and get it through. I think we're getting close to time. We'll take a couple more.
Harry, I'm going to save you a lot of talking, and I know you need something cool to drink, but thank you for coming out, and we appreciate it. And I know that all the citizens in the 11th want to know what's going on, and again, we appreciate your sharing that with us. I'm going to ask you a question that you can answer in one word. And, will you commit to stopping corporate cronyism by letting the Export-Import Bank expire at the end of June?
Yes. And here's, this is the beauty of the way this works, is if we do nothing, it ends. We got a storm? If the export-import, two things. You said you can answer it in one word, and I thought, yeah, I bet I don't. It is set to expire in September. If Congress does nothing, it goes away. There's tremendous pressure to continue. But here's one of the things that we've been talking about. You're talking about, is there enough realism in there of what's going on in the real world? And we've met with several members. And we realize this. If we're going to balance the budget, if we're going to get rid of our debt, it's impossible to do it unless we reform the social programs. That's what's eating up our budget, what's in the mandatory budget, is all these social programs. How can we go in and reform the broken welfare system if we keep advocating corporate welfare? We're never going to be able to do it. So when we look at welfare, we're going to have to look at it from both ways. Those businesses, they can afford to hold. I mean, it's a Boeing. Boeing's the biggest user of it. The Export-Import Bank was started during World War II to help the Soviets. So it's way beyond the time. But yes, whether it comes up or not, we don't know. The majority leader has already said that he's opposed to it. So do we have time for one more?
I was going to go on a big ordeal, but I ain't going to do that. I'll just ask you one question. Because 20 years of having stuff pinned up, it's hard to get out in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I understand.
My generation, Generation X, were the baby boomers' kids. We're a very small minority part. We're actually going to be moving backwards for the first time ever.
Right.
And we got more education, or I do, than my father did. But anyway, I'm not going to be playing the victim mentality. My question is this. I'd like to get my day in, like you see a lot of them, going in front of Congress and getting, there are some serious issues, like I say, with the immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Take away the magnet, you said earlier. Let's take away the magnet that brings them here.
Right.
You have a kid, what is it, the 14th Amendment, or which one is it, that naturalization?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't talk about it.
Which is a misinterpretation.
Exactly, and we don't talk about that. We talk about building fences and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's some serious issues, like I say, the jobs, the greed. It's just endless. And I'd like to get I'd like to sit with somebody and try to get some of this stuff changed, because poverty does have I've had a lot of medical issues. My plant shut down right here in Carlsbad, went over to China.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about making a comeback, but I mean, it's kind of a little too late. You know, I'm trying to make a bottom line is I like to sit down with somebody and see if I can get some of these things changed.
Yeah, and talk to Carrick, and these are the things that do make a difference, because when I was at the state level, some of the best ideas came from folks with the boots on the ground, and we have some advisory committees. We're looking for the ideas of how do these things affect you, because look, I can get up on the floor and I've got a little bit of a bully pulpit.
Just one quick thing on that. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, no disrespect, but like I say, I went to Haiti. There is no middle class there, and that's what's going to happen here. That is what is happening here. It's rich and poor, and if people can't see that, they need to get off the internet, get off their phones, and start getting active and turning this thing around.
There's a young lady back there that had her hand up, and unfortunately we've got a time limit because they have to close the building, but she had a question back there.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey there, I'm from Sheridan County. As the chair of the subcommittee on oversight of Science, Space, and Technology Committee, do you plan to hold a hearing on Dr. William Thompson of the CDC, also known as the CDC whistleblower? He was granted full immunity and whistleblower status 3 weeks ago by our government, and he claims that he and several other scientists falsified data on a subset group of African American boys on an MMR versus autism paper. And this paper now has over 90 studies that use that as the foundation. And I urge you as a parent that you'll join Representative Bill Posey from Florida and support the legislation on vaccine safety and parental rights, and help bring about a study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids independent from the CDC and the pharmaceutical companies that profit from them.
Okay. Do you know if we're on Posey's bill with that?
We're not on it as yet.
Because I believe it's a parent's decision whether to immunize or not. And so I'm looking at our wife. Most of our children, we didn't immunize. They're healthy.
Right.
Of course, homeschooling, we didn't have to get the mandatory immunization. You're going to be busy this week, Easton.
Okay, my anniversary is Sunday, so as long as you get me back before then, I'm more than happy to
So will you be able to hold a hearing on this
Yes, and I just saw a couple of hearings come up, but very possibly we can do that. It's all jurisdictional, but it sounds like that's within the jurisdictional boundaries. It's either ours or dealing with the CDC. It may be Energy and Commerce, which deals with health, but we can work with those committees and even do joint hearings. But definitely, I want to get more information from you. And being in Cherokee County, our main office is on Highway 92 in Woodstock. Yeah. When's it opening, Carrick? Where do you go? First of next week. We've been working on folding tables in a little corner while they've been getting the office remodeled. But yeah, let's engage, because I'm very interested in that. I know when you said whistleblower, I did see that we have a hearing coming up dealing with a whistleblower. I don't think it's that one.
This all just happened during the measles. Okay. It's kind of behind the scenes.
But I do have some autonomy with the chairman. He has come up and we meet regularly. He says, what kind of areas you guys want to look in? And so definitely interested.
If you didn't get your question asked, if you're completed out here, we'll actually give you a call and talk about it. We won't put it up, but you'll get a call in the next week, and we'll answer your question via phone. So if you can leave your question out here at the table, we appreciate it. We definitely, again, thank everybody for coming. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.